aftermath, the moon and the soil and the earth, breaking through the rocks, growing wild and tall till the buds begin to pop. So pack me in a bowl or roll me in a spliff, while you're breaking me down, you can feel your fingers stick.
Welcome to The Smoking Spot, a really good podcast about weed. I'm Ryan Herron here in Portland, Oregon.
And I'm Amanda Breeze in Toronto. And on today's episode of The Smoking Spot, we are reviewing some new old terminology.
It's time for an update. Many things have changed in the last 2 years of cannabis as far as flavorings and terpenes and perceptions on where these scents and flavors are coming from. And so when Amanda and I were kind of kicking back, thinking about what we're going to talk about for today's episode, we thought, hey, let's kind of take this opportunity now that we're doing video to reintroduce ourselves just a little bit before updating everyone on kind of what's current in the terpene and flavorant world.
Yeah, this is a whole new experience. I mean, we've been recording audio only for the past almost 2 years. And now we've made this move to video, and it's very different. Don't you think, Ryan? It feels different.
Yeah, it's always been more of a conversation than a phone call sort of a thing, but this is makes it more official. Now I have to put a hat on or get my hair cut.
Now everyone knows how much we smoke during our episodes as well.
I think you can hear it, even though you go around and cut out all of the lighter flicks and heavy exhales. People now know.
It's so true. So yeah, we're here. We're on video. This is what we look like to all of our dedicated listeners. As you guys, any of our regular listeners know, me and Ryan, we love smells. We love aromatics. We're huge scent nerds. We like formulating with terpenes. We like working with flavorants. And so we want to just kind of go back to our roots and review some of the basics of the language that we regularly use in our episodes, and catch you guys up on some new happenings in the world. What are you ripping on over there, Ryan? What are you smoking?
Oh, okay. I went out of my way to get this. This sounds like such a plug that you're like, okay, now as soon as we get past the intro, we'll get into it by asking me what I'm smoking. No, I can't help myself.
Okay. Also, we make no money off of this podcast.
Oh, right. You should just click this on all your TVs, let it play 24/7, and then, maybe I could buy some papers or something. We recoup some of the costs we put in. And that includes this tropical infusion, the Hurt Feelings cut that I got from High Noon.
Oh.
Okay, so it's a cross of Tropicana cookies and modified banana, which is a banana OG GMO cross. And yeah, it's great. It's sweet. It's candy. It's super loud orange, big tangerine, little woody top note. Yeah, it's really nice. Sweet, funky, orangey, sulfuric. It's got all the things we're going to talk about today. So I figured, why not get into it?
Ooh, I like that. So would you consider it to be like an exotic strain? I feel like banana is a fairly exotic breed.
I think that a different cut of this could be considered exotic. Right now, I'm going to call it orange with some bonus terps.
Oh.
Because I think that most consumers would not truly know the difference between a pound of Tropicana cookies and a pound of this. Just because, oh, hey, they just smell like loud orange. For you and I, there's a lot of nuance to dig into. Truly, I was looking for some Tropicana cookies on my way back from the coffee shop today. And searching through my notes, I thought, I'm sure I've written about Tropicana before. But I had not. I wrote about this tropical infusion that High Noon has been doing for the last year or so. And so I got really excited about my descriptors from last time and had to go out on my way to grab some.
Ooh, I like that.
Orange flavors are really divisive. So where do you fall on that spectrum?
Oh, I wish you didn't ask me this because I have very strong opinions on it.
That is what I want to hear.
I don't like, because there's...
Trash my favorites.
Yeah, no. Well, I'm a berry girl. I like my berries. But the thing about the citrus is, how do I explain it? I worked on a farm that used this chemical fertilizer and would spray their plants to increase this citrus aromatic. And I worked there very, very briefly because it was gross. But because of that smell, anytime, and it's a very specific, almost mandarin that you get, but it's really just this chemical. And for a while, I felt like I could discern whether it was a true terpene or this added flavor that was being sprayed on everything. But now, flavors have become more complex. And so it's hard for me to pinpoint if the flower I'm smoking had this shit sprayed on it or if it really truly does, have this robust tange flavor. So because of that, let's sum it up to like trauma.
Man, I haven't heard of people being traumatized by the spray pack. I'm sure it fucking happens. You know what I mean? But more often than not, you hear of folks who they're like, "Oh, I grew 24K gold for like 3 years, and that orange terp will never not be in my nose, and I can't get rid of it. I hate it. I don't want to be around it." Or for people that it's too strong, they'll hit some concentrates out of their rig, and then you go for something a little more subtle. You got this really nice, like lemony OG Kush. You go to hit it, and it just tastes like orange cleaner because that's the residue of flavor that's left behind. I get it.
It's orange cleaner, and it threw me off my tangerine delights.
Tangerine delights.
There's just like so many new flavors. So I feel like maybe limonene-rich tropical flavors have gone a little to the wayside. But, with the discovery of Tropicana sulfurs, maybe this is their new moment in the sun. Big Tropicana flavors is now uplifted that category for us.
Sure. I think it has, well, or it's at least giving us more of a language to speak around the subject. But I think it's interesting that you said that because in my research today, I was thinking, okay, for the longest time, we've attributed these citrus flavors to limonene. And that makes sense. If you have a bottle of limonene, I know Amanda's got a whole stack of them there. I was just digging through my closet to find some, and the best I could do was some Valencine. And it makes sense. You crack open that, you put your nose in it, boom, these like bright lemon rindy, sour notes just hit you in the face. It's super strong. And so when you're getting into some citrusy herb and you crack into that and you're smelling that, you're thinking the same thing. Big, loud citrus. Okay, limonene. Very interesting. If you go, the best place to start looking is Leafly's top limonene-dominant strains. And I have some of these here. And they're not what you'd expect. Banana OG, Berry White, Black Cherry Soda, Cinex, Do-Si-Do, Quantum Kush, Purple Hindu Kush, OG Kush. Well, what? We're not hearing like lemonade this, lemonade that, Oregon lemons, whatever. Because often those lemon citrus flavors are not coming directly from the limonene. The limonene is just a boost. So even better, if you want to really dig into this, go ahead and check out Abstrax top limonene dominant strains. This is a really good place to look because they are analyzing these strains specifically for their terpene content. Top of the list, we're going to get London Pound Cake, which is interesting. That's got limonene as its most dominant terpene. But then right after that, we're into Gelato, Purple Punch, White Fire OG, Clementine. There's a little citrus along with grapefruit and mimosa. But then we're back to OG Kush and SFV OG. Now, these are flavors that we don't typically think of being citrus dominant, but do have that sharp sour note to them. And so it's a lot of fun breaking all this down and thinking all of these citrusy smells that we go, damn, that smells like a glass of orange juice. Limonene is only providing a boost in that scent profile. It's not the dominant compound.
I'm really surprised by the lists, specifically the Do-Si-Do.
Yeah.
I never thought of it as being a good example of a high limonene flavor.
Right.
And the number of Kush on the list as well. But I mean, it also goes to show you that sometimes the most dominant terpene isn't necessarily the most dominant smell. Because when I think Kush, I think a little bit more earthy. But you're totally right. As I'm like kind of mulling this over, there is a sharpness to it, and there is that lightness to it that comes through.
And before we developed a greater vocabulary for it, I feel like OG Kush was typically described as lemony. Do you know what I'm saying? Like old school weed, especially Kush type things, people would say like that was like a desirable trait.
Well, I think that's how citrus became so prevalent for a time because, pre-legalization, earthy,
Yeah.
herbaceous,
Yeah.
quite common. And when you came across a strain, I mean, if we go to my favorite, Blue Dream, it wasn't really even cultivated until the 2000s, right? So when you think back to like where strains came from, a lot of these flavors were sought out through breeding to enhance the profile. And so in a way, that's why the citrus was so celebrated for so long and such a like desired feature. And then very quickly it evolved into other fruits and other flavors. And now we've taken it, way next level where we're trying to separate the difference between limonene, valencine, nerolidol, and Tropicana sulfurs. Now all of a sudden we have this whole new group that sort of sits under the same type of umbrella, but we have all these subtleties within the notes that we're finding.
Right. Well, and watch as we continue to study this, and companies like Abstrax continue to dive deeper into the fragrance of cannabis. And we talk about this all the time, how different compounds have different impacts. So you just listed a handful of compounds that we know have a citral type scent to them. We're only going to discover more of these compounds. Next year, 5 years from now, we might be looking at 45 different citrus leaning compounds. And we just know that they're just making up part of the bouquet. That is why, and a plug for Scentelligence, our scentelligenceproject.com, where we have this cannabis aroma wheel that breaks things down by scent, by individual accord, by category. And very purposefully, we left off any terpenes on that list. We left off any specific compounds in general because they're helpful to analyze the specific recipe of this bouquet that we're smelling. But as far as conversation goes, if we're talking about limonene, well, hey, we now know that's some do-si-do, that's some mac, that's some berry white. That doesn't necessarily mean we're talking citrus.
I just have to put a little aside in here because every time you say Barry White, I get so excited. That was like such a sought after strain for me.
It's not around anymore.
Yeah.
2018, right?
Like,
Yeah.
no, like I was seeking it out maybe 10 years ago,
Awesome.
right? Like I was like on the hunt because it's also aesthetically a lighter color. At least what was being cultivated in California was this lighter color to being almost white,
Oh,
right? It
wow.
was like so crystally and the chlorophyll was like low. I don't know. It was just like this whiter strain. And I was on this hard hunt at the time because I was looking for a rare albino nug. I was like, I've heard of these albino nugs. I really want to see one in person. They're not called albinos, they're called variegated, and some of them are white and some of them are green. And so I was on the hunt and I remember sneaking in to my first like California weed cup because you had to have a medical card and I was Canadian, so I didn't have one. So I had to sneak in and I spent the whole day going to every booth searching out this albino strain. Finally came across a berry white. I will say it was pale, very pale green, very trichome rich, milky. So I was like, this is close. This will do. But it tasted so fucking good. It wasn't a disappointment. It wasn't what I was looking for, but
I think that the light bleach nugs that I have not had the pleasure of smoking, because I hear that they're not very pleasurable to smoke. Every time that, like, it seems like it's more prevalent now that more people are using LEDs and they're able to bring the light like directly onto the canopy. Like you can't do that with something that with a lamp that's going to get hot, it will burn the plants. And so that top cola is just getting insane lumens just directly focused on it. And the pigments can't keep up. And it just, you get this light bleached nug. And I've seen people like cure them or freeze dry them. And it's kind of a novelty, and I want to smoke one, but you know that it's not good.
no, definitely the light bleaching. I remember like, was it last year? This was pre-AI on Instagram, but like that nug shot was going around of like a white cola and people were getting stoked. And in the end, it was because it was being basically burnt by the lumens from these lamps. But the first time I did see white flower was a outdoor grow and it was variegated, which happens in all kinds of plants. It basically just is like a mutation where the half of the plant doesn't get chlorophyll, so the leaves will be off colored or white. And you'll see like variegated monsteras and pothos, like
Yes,
houseplants.
yes.
You'll see variegated ones where the leaves are like a mix of green and white.
And there's always like a fat upcharge for those.
Yeah, because it is sort of like this mutation, but it's like it looks really cool. Now, the thing about variegated cannabis that I learned is that if the whole plant was white, it means it's not getting the nutrients it needs to grow. So they usually die out. So a healthy variegated plant has to have both green and white. Otherwise, it'll just die. So the one that was growing in the garden of a different farm I was working at actually had leaves that were half white, half green, perfectly split down the middle, and nugs, Ryan, nugs. Now, cannabis flower grows in a spiral up the stems. Okay. So if you ever look at a long stem and you swirl it, it literally, weed flowers grow in a spiral, and you could see nugs half and the spiral. Even some of the sugar leaves
Ooh,
were variegated white and green. Like it was so beautiful. But I'm working on a weed farm. So he's like, oh, check it out. And I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. And he was like, yeah, take some nugs, but it's like fresh off the plant. So I grab a few nugs and I just like put them in my pocket, and then you
work for the next 13 hours and then you reach in your pocket and it's not a pretty nug anymore. Yeah. Oh,
also like they need to be cured, they need a little bit of love and attention. You can't just like smoke it straight out of the pocket. But I did dry them out a little. And of course I did try it, but yeah, it's just an interesting freak of nature. But then on the flip side, non-variegated, you can have really white milky trichomes, a really pale green flower, and it will give this white appearance, which is the berry white that I tried that time. And Cali was definitely in that family of plants. And I'm trying to remember now. I feel like the variegated plant didn't even really have a strong smell. They don't tend to thrive.
right. And if you test it and it comes back at 8%, then, for the market, no one's really that excited about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Even if, like, as an ornamental, it's like, shit, that's what I want to grow in my garden. I don't need to smoke it.
So freaking pretty. I know that's the thing with seasonal work. How fun would it be to have cloned it and just kind of tried to hone in on it? But this plant just grew in the garden. It was like no explanation as to how it got variegated.
Wow. Yeah. You pop 10 million seeds and one pops up like that, and you either baby it or you go, oh, look at that. And then it's gone.
Yeah, exactly. So back to the aromatics though, because I do want to take just like one little step back for our listeners, because what we're talking about today are different aromatic compounds. These are aromatic molecules. They're literally these little bubbles that contain scent that are grown naturally in plants. And as many people in cannabis know, terpenes are one of the most common aromatic molecules we find, but not just in cannabis, in literally all plants, all of them. Uh, but then we're discussing this second category now, this newly evolved category known as flavorants, which includes things like the Tropicana sulfurs that we kind of touched on. And then, there's other categories of aromatics like the esters and the aldehyde. So there's lots of different categories of aromatics. And just to echo what Ryan said before I derailed us, that's why we didn't include terpenes or scent compounds or any of that on our aroma wheel, because the point wasn't to feature terpenes because they're not the only molecules that are creating these bouquets of smells. So when you smell a cannabis strain and you're like, oh, it smells like mandarin and a hint of grapefruit, it's thousands of scent compounds together that are releasing for us to experience that smell. It's not just limonene terpene.
Right.
So there's lots of different families, and we're talking overall today. So I think you'll hear some reference to terpenes like limonene and nerolidol, and then you'll hear some reference to other compounds that Ryan's going to get into. I feel like you have some fun facts for us.
You know what? I didn't go deep on the science this week. I just thought, let's find some specific examples and kind of talk about their like rise to this trendy space they're in. Like Tropicana cookies really caught the attention of a lot of folks. We can trace this like orange purple thing back to, I think probably the most popular example I can think of is Crockett's purple tangie cut that was popular 20 years ago. Tangie, in many ways, or maybe in most ways, is where we get this orange scented terp, especially something so specific that even someone who isn't super familiar with cannabis can stick their nose in there and they're not going to be like, "Ooh, smells like weed." They're going to say, "Hey, oh, that smells like orange." Which is, I think, really fascinating that we can take this plant, make it smell like something else. Chocolate spearmint is such a fun example of that too. Now that it's spring and everybody's got these herbs growing in their gardens here in Portland, sticking your nose in something that looks like mint and it truly does smell like chocolate as well is like, whoa, okay, that'll raise an eyebrow. But anyway, I have this written down. Crockett's Purple Tangie is a Cali O skunk hybrid, which is really what Tangie is. And so we get these skunky, sulfuric, likely thiols in the lineage of this strain. And then anyone who smelled Tangie or Purple Tangie or any of those older citrus leaning cuts, I feel like they didn't have a lot of that sour burnt match funk. It's a burnt match. Like some people kind of like that smell, myself included, right? That's sulfur dioxide. So we can get into that scent and go, okay, I can kind of appreciate that. That was missing from those previous renditions. But now when we're back with Tropicana cookies and we basically got Tangie by Girl Scout cookies. So now we've got this futury funk forward citrus, and then it does have that background that contributes to the funk of those thiols that we now know are likely sulfuric and present in things like onions and garlic. I think a lot of people will complain that Tropicana cookies or things like this tropical infusion I'm smoking now are kind of redundant compared to some of these older cuts that offered the same thing, but they're really ignoring all of the work that's been done from this one note, it smells like an orange, to, hey, now it's like a whole cologne of citrus and cedars and, like you were saying, grapefruits, and something that's more complex and definitely more interesting.
Yes. And the thing is too, like you're saying, these are exotic scents. These are exotic flavors. So there's a difference between let's say a lemon OG, common, tastes like lemon, it's delicious, we love it, and exotics that are featuring tropical volatile sulfurs and or the stink side of it, which is the volatile sulfur compounds or thiols or the scatol and the indole, right? If we're getting into the burnt category and the stink category. And these are only found in exotics. They're not super common. So don't assume every citrus is going to be featuring that little special kick of Tropicana sulfurs. And part of the work of cannabis sommeliers and the work that we do is being able to identify the difference. That's what makes something a luxury product, not just a common run of the mill tomato, you know?
Yeah, oh, exactly. And I'm looking at the winners of last week's Oregon Leaf Cup, which was a lot of fun and a big award show. I got to rub elbows with a lot of cannabis Illuminati. So it was nice to see everyone, but it was cool to, I'm like telling Amanda, hey, cut that last part out. I really only want to talk about weed, not people I got to
You're
talk
not
to.
allowed to talk about Illuminati if you live in Oregon.
I know. They were like, hey, you need to cut that out or we're just going to delete your whole podcast. That's where we get all the future strains. No, anyway, there's quite a bit of these complex citrus profiles in the winning categories. I'm seeing London Cello. I'm seeing Trop Cherry, Orange Blossom, a handful of others. Gastropop, which I know has like a little candy citrus note to it. So it's clearly something that people who like flavor gravitate towards. I think that we can kind of examine why we like citrus and funky flavors all together, but altogether these things are just pleasing.
I don't know. I'm kind of surprised by that. I'm genuinely surprised by that list. Like, okay, a lot of them did sound amazing. All right, like just straight up, they all sounded really good. But at the same time, I I feel like okay, I feel like Oregon is really leading the way when it comes to exploring flavors in cannabis. So I'm almost my surprise comes from the fact that you're not naming crazier things as being the winners. Like last year, we were talking about horchata and nut flavors and like peanut butter breaths and stuff, but somehow flip, we're back to citruses.
Ha! Well, okay. That is just a handful of the responses. So there are some more esoteric winners on here, but also, I mean, Gelato 33 won as best indoor dessert, you know? And I mean, that's not leading the way in anything. That's just a familiar thing that's interesting. But yeah, we get to see things like Gas Basket or Pineapple Milkshake that are more representative of these kind of far out flavors that we're leaning into now. Pure Michigan and Point Break, those are kind of OG leaning flavors. So bringing classics back with some bonus terps. Our group didn't necessarily agree with all of the winners that came up. And some of the judges would lean forward and say, well, that wasn't my personal winner of that category, but I guess others liked it. And it did tend to lean towards the general. I don't know if anyone listening has gotten a chance to try Toad Venom yet, but it's a newer profile that's really sharp. It's really desirable right now. It kind of leads towards like an old funk with a candy background, and that was like the judges' winner because it was more complex and kind of weird and kind of fringy as far as flavors go. And I don't think that one actually took any winners. It was just a judge's favorite, let's call it.
Interesting. Because that's really sums up what I was feeling. I'm like, these more eclectic strains, like, I don't know. I'm having like a cognitive dissonant moment because on one hand we're discussing these like the heavy science behind aromatics in cannabis and the flavoring differentiation of these little teeny molecules. Meanwhile, we're talking about toad breath and like pineapple milkshake. Like these are our outliers.
It's so hard talking to like my family members who are just getting into weed, and they're like, I just went to the dispensary for the first time today. The guy really wanted me to buy some rosins, and also I don't like the name of anything. I'm like, you're not wrong about either of those things, and you're also not ready for rosin yet unless it's an edible.
Yeah, also, I mean, maybe what we're seeing right now is an interesting shift that I certainly didn't predict, where we're going back to the classics. People are like, tried and true, we love these flavors. This is what popped off. This is what made weed special when these came out. Like, these legendary strains are still not going anywhere, despite overzealous hybridization across, North America and the world, and all these new flavors popping off. But some things were just done right the first time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and also legalization has really fucked things up, pushing us in one direction for cannabis. Kind of akin to all of those years, like I'm thinking like the 90s, where cannabis was mostly legal, mostly carried some heavy penalties, but growing equipment had kind of caught up to the point that you could throw a light in your closet with 4 plants and get some pretty good results if you knew what you were doing. The only problem was you had to keep that shit quiet and not loud and not fucking stink up the neighborhood with it. And that's why we saw things like DJ Short's Blueberry get all this attention because, hey, it's like a short plant, smells really nice if you get your nose in the jar, and it's not going to blow up your neighbors. So it's great weed to grow in your garage or whatever. Now we're on the other side of it where it's like, okay, it has to test 35% and it needs to look like this in the jar and it should probably have some kind of runts in it because everybody fucking loves runts, myself included. And it's not, we're not getting weird shit like the white weed, like you were saying. We're not getting these weird profiles where we're like, there's just a little bit of it, but it tastes exactly like hazelnut butter or whatever. And those things exist. So I think we're kind of going to get out of these new dark ages or whatever we want to call them. And maybe we'll talk about rescheduling in a future episode, but that is a can of worms I'm not interested in talking about today.
Oh, Lordy. I'm sure everyone's been following it.
Yeah, yeah. Amanda doesn't even live in the States and is like, fucking my whole last week has been about this.
Yeah, somewhat, global happenings. But, it's interesting watching the states scramble over something everyone's fucking using. It's honestly kind of embarrassing at this point,
Agreed.
but they're going to try to, monopolize and make money just like they're doing here, and at to the detriment of the growers and the workers. You know, high taxes, low yields. I mean, the big thing, let's just touch on this maybe. The big thing I've been seeing is people's concern for home growing not being part of the conversation and being completely overlooked. And that to me is challenging the rights and freedoms of any people. If you're going to legalize a plant and then say, but you can only buy it from us, you cannot grow it, there's something seriously fucking wrong with that. And I think it is a statement on what the planning behind the scenes is happening to be, have it still be like a heavily controlled substance, maybe prescription only. You know, I doubt that's the way it'll go, because then the black market will continue to live, right? The whole point of legalizing is to squash the black market and turn that money into a profit for the gov. So the home growing piece is one that I hope people are equally as concerned with, because that is the freedom, being able to grow your own.
Right. And that is where, if I'm experiencing some flavors that are not trendy and not like, hey, you got to try this. I just got this clone. We just got the first batch in. But really, some like, hey, I have my tent going and I've been doing this buttered popcorn OG for a minute. You should try it. It's really weird and fun. Like that's who I get those from. Those things don't end up outside the like grower's practice tent and all of that stuff gets smoked by him or thrown away. We need this little home growing piece to exist. Or, I mean, we've done it before, we can do it again. You can just say we're not allowed to, and we'll blow it up bigger and better than ever. And I mean, at this point, we don't need a lot of excuses or reasons to go back to the traditional market. In many ways, we're already there. But let's see here. I'm going to remain optimistic, and I think that this is something you and I and our audience here will be talking about for the next year to come.
Yeah, I popped some seeds this week.
Yes. Tell us what you're growing.
Despite the fact that I lack sunshine, growing weed is something I love to do. So I pulled some seeds from seeded plants from last year.
Purposefully seeded plants?
No,
Flashback to me growing a bunch of males on my back porch because they're pretty.
it's the name of the game. You grow outdoors, you know, other people are cultivating. It's a risk you take. What happened was a couple of males snuck into the garden. The garden that I was working at is sort of, how can we describe it? It's very natural. So there's no rows, you know, it's a regenerative gardening style. So it's a lot of other plants are growing in between the weed plants. So it's more of like a traditional garden, and there's weed plants in the garden. So, you know, sometimes plants can be in an area that's like has a lot going on, and you might not see that the males are popped off there. A couple males snuck through and seeded a lot. So yeah, I just but the thing about seeded weed is you don't want to smoke it, but it's still great for making edibles. So it's not like we're just gonna toss it out. We kind of let it come to finish. Super silver goo. Classic. Speaking of legendary strains, I mean, that's just fucking right top 10. It's right up there.
Yeah.
So yeah, silver goo. And I also was given some seeds from Garden of Kaya that's based out of New Brunswick. And they were selling seeds at an event that I was recently at, and gave me a pack of CBD seeds. So I'm like really excited about those, because they're generally quite hard to cultivate yourself. Like anytime I've had a CBD plant get seeded, it's probably with a THC male. And so you end up with some sort of mystery ratio.
Yep.
So I'm pretty stoked on these being like genuine feminized. Like I never work with bought seeds because I always have seeded plants. So I'm like, whatever, a couple will be male, a couple will be female. Like who cares? We'll just pop a bunch and see what happens. But this is my first time actually popping feminized CBD. So I'm kind of excited.
Yeah, you'll know you're working with all ladies there, so you won't have to be in there checking all the time to make sure your plants aren't seeding somebody else's. And that'll be fun. And hey, if you get some like mixes, that's really cool too, especially if you're not testing it, because you can just smoke it and say, oh, wow, that one got me really stoned. Or, hey, I feel pretty good. Go get my hair cut.
Honestly, I feel like I've gotten pretty good at guesstimating percentages, but that's a crazy thing to say because there's so many factors.
No way. No. Hey, I'm with you there. I think that if you laid out 5 mixed cannabinoid samples for me, I could probably pick out each one in order of strength and ballpark it within a few percentages according to the lab that I trust.
You know what? I think that sounds like a motherfucking challenge, Ryan.
Let's do this. Let's do this. Camp Canna, are you there? Let's lay this out. Challenge for next year. I will let you know if you got some 12% boof or some 29% dank. No, I I think that numbers are bullshit to begin with.
Yeah, it is a bummer. And also because we're both smell experts, we both know that a high terp count. Now, we're going to say high terp count because that's all that's being calculated right now. We have no other numbers when we look at packaging. But let's say if it's really loud and a certain aromatic profile is present, it can be stronger. Like you might have a 12% and then a 12% THC with an 8% terp count, and it's going to be really loud and it's going to be really tasty and it's going to kind of fuck you up and bring you to that place. But you could have a 28% at 2% terps and not have the same effect at all. So, challenge accepted. Let's fucking go for it.
Right? I got my wheel. I got my trusty Mendo mulcher grinder and a fresh pack of papers. Let's go to town.
Hell yeah. Well, I'm doing some reviews right now, so I've been exploring some new strains.
Oh, tell me more about this.
Yeah, I've been looking for more uniquely Canadian strains because May 24 is on the horizon. And for our American listeners, May 24 is known as the, May long weekend in Canada. It's Victoria Day weekend. It's a national holiday. And I literally just learned it's because of the Queen's birthday.
Oh, okay. I literally just learned that too.
I also learned this week it's Canada's oldest holiday. And it's it was from the Queen's birthday, and we're one of the only countries that still celebrates that. So, and now she's dead. Oh no, it was Queen Victoria. That's dumb.
And she's still alive, so it's okay.
No, she died way before the last. She was the one before that.
Whew. Who can keep track of all these queens?
I think this is a fucking history podcast. Okay, so anyway.
And what was her favorite smoking spot? And did she like Barry White, or was she more of a Blue Dream gal?
We could tell you the lineage of a fucking strain for the past 30 years, but I don't even know my goddamn nation's holidays.
Why should you? Why should you? Also, if you're Obama and somebody goes, okay, we're noticing this trend, your name trending all over, but it's actually like on the Leafly menu. It's Obama Kush. It seems to be really popular right now. Don't you think you would have to send an intern out to get some just to try it, right? If they said, hey, Ryan, we named a pasta after you, it's getting really popular, I'd have to try it. You know what I mean?
Oh my God. Yeah, of course you have to. Can you imagine? I'm going to say it for the record right now. It's never been a dream of mine to have a weed strain named after me, but starting today, it might be.
Gosh, I want one too now. So, I mean, get out there, you get to working, right? And then you can combine our 2 strains and call it Centelligence Project.
I love that. This balcony is not going to be the place for it, but yeah, anyway, it's May 24 long weekend. It's coming up. It's the start of summer here. And it's also like gardening weekend, open the cottage weekend, open the pool weekend. It's like a long weekend. People do yard work and get ready for the summer fun season. And so that's why I popped the seeds this week, because it's now or never. I need them to be a little bit less seed and more plant in the next coming weeks for the planting season weekend. But yeah, I've been looking for themes, strains, and I found a new trend, flights.
Yes.
So similar to, an alcohol flight where you have like 5 different types of beer, I'm seeing cannabis flights with 3 to 5 different flavors. And I'm like, that feels luxurious. That feels exclusive and delicious. So there's a lot of flights that I've been seeing. But to me, I'm wondering about the pairings. Like, this is where we go from like basic bitch to luxury product, because I'm like, is it just the 3 strains you guys have on hand? And someone in marketing was like, why don't we sell all 3 at once? Or did you cultivate a flavor profile that works well together, where we're taking it on a journey, a flavor journey? not just, oh, we're growing. You know, like I would love a party pack that's like designed for bud tenders, designed for flavor nerds in the tropical category, Ryan. Follow stick with me on this one because if we had some nice three limonene, citrus, tropical, Tropicana sulfur party pack where you could taste the difference.
Mouth watering. I'm all over this. And flights have become more difficult to sell here. That was something that when we first launched and regulations were slim, a few places, pharma especially, rocked it. Rocked it. You would go, you get the little branded box. It was Swan. You'd open it up, the three little jars in there led you through something. Each one experienced something else, each one a different sun grown cultivar or whatever they were doing that month. And I talked to the owners before they sold it, and I was like, what happened to those beautiful flights? And they said the OLCC just made it way too difficult. He also told me that they had a whole basement full of the packaging. I should find out whatever happened to that. But yes, please bring that back. And I think we need somebody like a Canasom to lead the experience. Many growers are thinking of stuff like that. They really are thinking, okay, next year, 420, what do I want to release? Oh, that's April. Let's do a spring flowers pack. Okay, well, that means I need to start hunting now for my violet flavor so it can be in production. Like, that's a long lead time.
Yeah.
And that's something cannabis growers in the traditional market never had to fucking think about a candy cane OG for the Christmas season. But we're brands now and we can do cool shit like that. And if you want to lean into it and have fun, then you can do that sort of planning. Or you hit up somebody like Amanda to come out to your facility and put together some cool concentrates stack for your 710 this year, and then you come in and you buy something that is like approved by a quality nose to walk you through from the honey bananas to the banana orange to the like orange dynamite or whatever the hell. And then that's like a true experience that you can't get by just piecemealing stuff together at the dispensary.
Oh, and knowing me, I'd be like, I picked Blue Dream, Blue Dream, and Blue Dream. So that you know what?
Okay, if it was traditional Blue Dream, okay, and then we have a Blue Dream back cross, and then we have like neon Blue Dream. Now it's a connoisseur's pack. Now I want to see, oh, what's the difference here? What does this one have to offer that this one does not, and vice versa?
Exactly. And then I'd like to really, since we're taking requests, what I'd really like to move into, I feel like I haven't really had the opportunity to explore stinks as much as I'd like to. Like scientifically, I've read and explored it, but actually getting my hands on a variety of stinks has been next to impossible. I mean, just because I can't tell from the packaging what's what. You can do research, but sometimes the stink is inflated. Like dank gets used a lot as a descriptor. But when we talked last year about volatile sulfur compounds, which is the skunk smell in cannabis, and they were differentiating between VSC1 and VSC7, saying, 5 and 6 are the most common in cannabis, but one is more leaning towards like a garlic, skunk, and one is a little bit more onion. And I'm like, give that to me. Like, I don't even want it, but I need it.
Yeah. Well, you're going to have to come out here for a skunkation and we can get into all of these funky smells. And I think that, the deli style of Oregon, we can really lean into just getting a lot of jars on our faces and then only grabbing the funkiest, most baby poopiest, halitosis, like leading the way, cabbages under a tarp, fire at the garlic factory, skunk fight, tractor fire, heavy strain.
Yeah,
I think we need to for science, We represented all of this stuff on the wheel, but actually getting a whole grip of it in front of us, that's a different story.
it's for science. So if anyone wants to sponsor my skunkcation in Oregon, let us know.
Yeah. Yes. Also, Amanda uses as many resources as a skunk. You can just drop her down in your living room and not even realize that the peanut butter went missing, and she's fine. She's totally fine. She didn't need anything else.
That is so fucking true, Ryan. You know what? You called me out last week for my overflowing ashtrays, and now this week you're letting the world know that I'm just like a little fucking raccoon in human form.
No, see, a raccoon would steal your shit. A skunk would not. Okay? And if you're nice to a skunk, they won't even stink up the place. And I know that's true of you as well. So
Oh my God, that's so poetic. Thank you. That is such a lovely compliment, Ryan. Thank you so much.
all the more reason to come out here and yeah, let's put together a branded pack of skunk leaning scents. Everyone would have this recent obsession with roadkill skunk, which I think accentuates those funky sulfuric thiol scents. And hey, while we're talking about it, I found this kind of interesting in my reading today, is that because we have evolved to detect these sulfuric compounds in very low levels, because often they represent, let's say, rotting food or something that we should avoid, like lava. It's like they alarm us in a way that we can detect them in very, very small quantities. So it's like, okay, we evolved alongside citrus to go, ooh, yum, a snack, yum, 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 vitamins, fiber. We evolved along these funky sulfuric thiols or whatever to say, avoid at all costs. You and your family could die if you drink this water. So we take something like ethanol, and it's relatively easy to detect. It's kind of sweet in some ways. It might be considered pleasant if you're thinking of a nice cocktail. And then ethane thiol, a similar compound with that just sulfuric atom or atoms added to it. I'm not a chemist. We can detect in 1/1000th of the quantity of ethanol. So where you can kind of go, ooh, that's a really nice cocktail you made me. If I poured that much into a martini glass and shook it up and handed it to you, it would clear the fucking room. So these compounds, like we keep saying, are only present in these minute amounts for us to pick them out and go, ooh, I kind of like that, as long as it's just a hint and not an overwhelming who rotted this egg in the shell and then cracked it in front of my nose.
100%. And if you're still here and you're still listening and you find this interesting, you should actually check out was it our spice episode? It was our Valentine's episode, the aphrodisiacs episode.
Yes.
Sorry, I know we both agreed to block that one out, but
Oh, yeah, don't recommend that episode.
but if you're curious about the pleasantness of a stink and why, we really got into the science on that one in the Valentine's aphrodisiac episode. Okay, but also, right, isn't it so? I still find it interesting that the episode we did for Valentine's Day on aphrodisiacs, answering the question, is weed an aphrodisiac, was simultaneously the episode on the stinkiest stinks, because that is what humans are often noticed and are attracted to because of this ingrained defense mechanism that exists in ourselves and the plants around us to produce and experience these smells and react to them appropriately. Like, oh, it smells like burning meat, I should not go near there. Meanwhile, in the weed industry, we're like, that's exotic. How do we get our hands on that? So
Yeah, Chili's baby back ribs OG, like I'm in line for it.
yeah,
I guess it's just that thing where as soon as you let your defenses down a little bit, you're willing to embrace that extra funk, that extra notes. Like that's what love is, right?
yeah,
I want to open up a jar of some in sickness or in health, right?
that's so funny. All right, so here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that maybe what we should do for with our listeners is I would love to get some extreme suggestions on exotic aromatic strains that you guys have tried that you think hit these notes that we've been talking about. Because how fun would it be to put together a nice little list? Like maybe we can't launch our own taster pack, but we can definitely maybe craft some suggestions for people who want to experience more exotic flavors so that they can start to taste the difference. And I know like Ryan and I often use terpenes to help distinguish. We use liquid terpenes. So extracted from botanical sources, they're isolated molecules to be one specific single note scent. So a bottle of limonene, for example, is exclusively filled with that one molecule, that one singular lemon scent. But when it comes to these smells, they don't exist. No one's making a bottle of fucking Scatol and saying, enjoy this, right? And essential oils that one, for example, I think it's buchu. It smells like rotting onions. If you look at its profile, they're not identifying anything other than terpenes, and it's Limonene-rich. So that's not a very good indicator for us. So we need to actually use our sense of taste, our sense of smell to try to identify these exotics. So I think I'm going to challenge us and our listeners to put together a little list of strains they found that they think feature these rare, hard to identify compounds that only last year were officially announced to even exist in cannabis through scientific studying and breaking down these minute botanical molecules.
Yeah, anything that you feel like the terpenes aren't telling the full story, let's talk about it. Let's get our noses in it. And hey, we got a lot of friends in the industry. It's not outlandish that we could get these in front of some analysis and maybe get a better idea of what are in these strains.
Yeah, I want to see what's popping off, especially home growers, because I feel like that's now here where most of the innovation is going to be taking place. I know people are breeding, but right now, if you're working in legal, you're breeding for selling. You're breeding to make money. Of course, why wouldn't you? You want to come up with the next Girl Scout cookie, Tropicana, and you want something that people are going to buy a lot of. But home growers, we still have the curiosity, the mischief. We want to find those little rare flavs. So, hey, I'm in Toronto. If anyone is cultivating something interesting, I'd love to follow it along for the growing season and see how it turns out. Also, I'll have some extra seeds if anyone needs some starters.
Don't trust Amanda's pocket full of seeds.
I'll include a picture of what a male plant looks like so you can cut it just in case.
No, I'm sure at this point your collection is like pretty impressive and you could get us through the apocalypse if we needed to.
I have, a pretty obscene amount of seeds collected. Now, a lot of people say that cannabis seeds are really only good for 2 years. Like, seeds are not meant to be kept forever. But I've also seen people pop really old seeds. Like, if you had 20 from 20 years ago, maybe only 2 might take. But never throw them out. It's what if you call it a library, then it's not a problem. Okay?
Yes. If you're gearing up just in case something happens to worldwide infrastructure and you still need to have a weed garden, by all means, keep all the jars, keep them in a dark place away from any light or water. And hey, with tissue culturing now, I have seen some pretty remarkable seeds get cracked and still grown. And people will do run like seed crackers over these old seeds to make those old plants inside have a little easier journey outside the shell. Especially some of those older seeds the shells are like crazy thick. They're made for like floating down rivers, not just like being handed from one dude's basement to the next. So yeah, that's crack those old seeds, get them out, put them in your gardens. And like Amanda was saying, we are into following more journeys. So longer form stories like growing something interesting, growing something with a backstory would be something we might be interested in documenting. So give us a shout.
And I guess the last hot tip of the day is if you have some old seeds that are really, you think are tough and not going to take, you can take a little bit of sandpaper and just gently rub the outside of your seed, and that can help it germinate. Fun fact of the day.
Yeah, good spring tips for these old little guys.
Yeah, spring tips for your spring garden. Thanks so much for tuning in. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe.
Yeah, and if you need to follow us over on Instagram,
You can find both of us at the.smokingspot. Until next week.
Said no matter what kind of pain and anguish life may bring you, oh, smoke it up, hold it down, and don't ever stop. Well, you can always find your smoking spot. Yeah, you can always find your smoking spot.
Hey, Smoking Spot fans. We're here to tell you about the newest launch from Centelligence Projects.
Over the last year, we've created the Cannabis Aroma Wheel. It's a sensory tool designed to help connoisseurs take their knowledge to the next level. So whether you're a bud tender, dispensary owner, cultivator, or you just love the smell of weed, you can better appreciate the cannabis in front of you.
Get your copy of the most detailed sensory tool built specifically for the cannabis industry and order your Cannabis Aroma Wheel today at centelligenceproject.com.